This AMC is one of the rarest ever made. Perhaps for good reason. What do you think is the rarest car ever made by American Motors? Perhaps the Pierre Cardin Javelin? Or the 1988 Eagle wagon, built after the Chrysler buyout? Or maybe the Rebel machine? Or the Hornet SC360? Well, the 1982 AMC Concord Sundancer convertible has them all beat. In fact, except for very special cars like the Hearst SS AMX and the extremely rare AMX3, the Sundancer is one of the lowest production AMC vehicles ever. However, rare doesn't always translate to valuable, which is part of the reason most people have never heard of the Sundancer. So, just how did these cars come to be? Or, more importantly, why? Now, before we answer that question, I'd like to remind everyone to watch our trailer for The Last Independent Automaker, a 6-part documentary series on the history of American Motors that we're currently producing. I'm really excited to share this project with all of you, so be sure to check it out, after you're done watching this video, of course. Now, back to the show. This story starts in the early 70s, when AMC management sat down to plan future products. Having found success with cars that offered something unique compared to Detroit's other Big Three automakers, CEO Roy Chapin Jr. wanted to continue what he called the company's philosophy of difference. Top proposals included a compact luxury car and a radically styled commuter car centered around maximizing interior space. Given increasing worries about traffic congestion and air pollution, management made the radical choice, approving what would become the 1975 AMC Pacer. And while the Pacer was certainly different, it wasn't the kind of different that drivers were looking for. After initial red-hot sales, the car's popularity cooled as buyers were turned off by its mediocre gas mileage and unusual looks. The sales slump meant that AMC couldn't raise the necessary capital to launch any big new products, so it returned to the old idea of a luxury compact, now on a shoestring budget. Designers took the solid but outdated AMC Hornet and threw every late 70s luxury cliché at it. It got a Landau roof, opera windows, hood ornament, crushed velveteen seats, fake wood grain, a digital clock, and any other knickknack they could add to make the car look new, while minimizing costly redesigns of the powertrain or major body panels. It did receive a handful of exterior tweaks, and gas misers could now opt for a new 2-liter 4-cylinder engine. Sourced from Volkswagen, the smaller motor actually cost extra over AMC's in-house inline-6. The Hornet name was put to rest, and American Motors christened the new car as the luxurious-sounding 1978 Concord. Advertising touted Concord as the luxury Americans want, the size America needs. And Americans must have agreed, as production jumped 55% over the previous year's Hornet. But all of that still doesn't explain where this car came from. Despite building some very eye-catching drop tops in the past, AMC had stopped making factory-produced convertibles after the 1968 Rebel. Gorgeous though they may have been, convertibles were low-volume products, and the volume had gotten too low for the company to justify making them. AMC's conclusion was not unique. GM, Ford, and Chrysler had also noticed a decrease in convertible sales as the 1960s came to a close. Blame it on rising prices, better air conditioning systems, faster speed limits, or even men growing longer hair. Whatever the reason, fewer people were interested in top-down motoring. Eager to cut costs, U.S. automakers began raising their roofs and cutting convertibles from their lineups. Rumors of possible government regulations for rollover safety accelerated the process until only the Cadillac Eldorado convertible remained, holding out until the end of 1976. In response, car makers tried to placate open-air aficionados with T-tops and sunroofs, and foreign brands still offered a trickle of convertibles. But for those who had to have the real thing, a sudden cottage industry of companies appeared to offer handmade drop-tops to fill the void. Lincoln Mark V seemed particularly popular. Often referred to as coach builders, a lot of these high-end body and fabrication shops came out of the hot rodding tradition. Now, making aftermarket convertibles seemed like the next logical step. One of these entrepreneurs, Jack Griffith, had already made a name for himself as a dealer and builder of low-volume sports cars. After a Miami Datsun dealership requested a handful of custom Z-Car convertibles, Griffith began chopping tops. Following the Z-Car project, the Griffith company set its sights on the Toyota Celica. The sporty little car proved an excellent candidate for convertible conversion, and even Toyota corporate signed on to the project. Called Sun Chaser, the cars were sold through Toyota's US dealerships, and demand grew strong enough for Griffith to make around 2,000 of them from 1979 to 1981. Based on the success of the Sun Chaser, Griffith next approached American Motors with a similar pitch. Suffering from a stagnant economy and a second energy crisis, AMC desperately needed new products to attract customers, and so the two companies entered a business agreement in 1980. Unfortunately, other than the Spirit liftback, American Motors didn't really have any small, sporty cars. Given their limited options, the convertible would be based on the two-door AMC Concord, and in a surprise twist, also the recently announced four-wheel drive AMC Eagle. Since the Eagle and Concord bodies were nearly identical, it made sense to get two models for the work of one. In keeping with the theme set by the Celica, the new convertibles were called Sundancer. Customers could order a Sundancer through their local AMC dealer, after which American Motors would send a two-door Concord or Eagle to Griffith's shop in Florida. There, they'd weld extra bracing underneath the car, then cut off the roof. Next, workers welded a heavy steel tube to the B-pillars to increase structural rigidity, and they'd cover it with a fiberglass shell. A vinyl-wrapped fiberglass panel spanned the distance from the roll bar to the windshield, and the backside featured a folding vinyl top with plastic windows. Technically, the center roll bar makes the Sundancer a Targa top and not a true convertible, but the Griffith company didn't bother to explain the difference, with brochures calling it a Sport Landau, a convertible. It's like having a car and a half. And let me tell you, with no power assists, dropping the top is a job and a half. First step is to roll down the windows. From there, we're going to unlatch the four latches on the inside of the removable roof panel. Now, we remove the panel and place it in this vinyl bag. As you can see, the bag barely has an inch to spare. Now comes the highly enjoyable task of trying to fit the bag and the panel in the trunk, which also barely has enough room. Next, we unlatch the inside of the canvas top and fold it down. Now we cover the canvas top with the vinyl boot. And finally, we're ready to go.
You said this would be easy. Please be careful what you claim. You're gone and got me in trouble, and this gets harder every day.
Technically, one person can do everything, but a second set of hands makes it a little easier. With the top down, it looks surprisingly good. The regular Concord was a decent-looking car in its own right, and most of that translates to the Sundancer. After all, it was hip to be square in the early 80s, and the Concord's quad headlights and rectangular grille helped square up the car's face and hide its decade-old roots. With the top up, the dark brown Targa band nicely integrates into the body, complementing the deep night blue paint and the contrasting tan roof. Although it turns out this vinyl has been replaced, as the original roof material actually matched the darker fiberglass section. Sheet metal could be ordered in any available Concord or Eagle color, but there were no options for the top, meaning buyers had better pick a paint that went well with brown. All in all, it's a nice, tidy package, even if the roll bar prevents it from being a 100% real convertible. On the Eagle version, the added ground clearance, fender flares, and more aggressive grille give it a tough appearance that suggests you might actually need that roll bar if you go off-roading. Griffith Company brochures touted the Eagle Sundancer as America's only four-wheel drive convertible, which conspicuously ignores AMC's own line of Jeeps, but perhaps they weren't counting SUVs. Upon closer inspection of the mechanisms, I definitely sensed a handmade feel to things. Not that it seemed poorly done, just that the pieces looked added on rather than designed in from the beginning. Granted, perhaps my opinion was tainted due to this car's condition. With its fair share of rock chips, fading paint, and other battle scars, this Concord has lived a rough life. The current owner joked that somebody must have kept it in a very tight garage, as almost every corner of the car has a dent or scratch. Inside, years of sun exposure have left a greenish tint to the brown leather, but part of me finds satisfaction in knowing whoever owned this actually drove it with the top down. Convertible or not, the Concord provided all the benefits of a luxury car interior, except perhaps the rear legroom. Big, soft, floating cushion seats offer living room-like comfort. Swaths of fake wood and deep pile carpet are as nice as anything you'd find in a Lincoln or Cadillac from the same time period. Some of the cheap plastic panels and old switchgear might betray the Concord's economy car origins, but it still leaps and bounds fancier than a Hornet. Most Sundancers started out as limited models, which included special badges, extra trim, leather seats, a wood grain steering wheel, and other doodads. On top of that, this Concord has added power windows and locks, and extra courtesy lights. Limited trim also included luxurious wire wheel covers, but this car traded those long ago for these older, turbine-style AMC wheels. One thing the limited package did not include was the powertrain. By 1982, buyers could choose between AMC's 4.2-liter inline-6 or a General Motors-built 2.5-liter inline-4, seen here. Colloquially known as the Iron Duke, the GM 4-cylinder replaced the Volkswagen engine in AMC vehicles starting in 1980 until 1984, when AMC finally started making their own 4-cylinder. Now, plenty of old car buffs love to make fun of American Motors for buying parts from other manufacturers, despite the fact that every car company does this from time to time, and AMC still built lots of their own components in-house. But with a GM engine and a Chrysler automatic transmission, this car is perhaps not the best example to refute that argument. With only 3 speeds and 82 horses, this little car has its work cut out for it.
I'm an AMC fan through and through, and I gotta say, I really do wish this car had the 6-cylinder. But I think the Iron Duke gets a lot of undeserved hate. It's an honest, reliable little engine. It's just not particularly powerful. This is especially noticeable at slow speeds, where you can lay into the throttle and there's a lot of racket, but not much action. But once you get up to cruising speed, it holds its own pretty well, and of course, being a convertible, it always feels like you're going faster than you actually are.
Cruising through the countryside with no traffic to compete with, the Concord manages just fine. The engine did sound a little noisy, but we later discovered that was just the cheap aftermarket exhaust falling apart. Despite this setback, I found the rest of the drive enjoyable.
One thing I think this car deserves extra credit for is the airflow is actually quite good. Even at highway speeds, there's not any wind buffeting or that terrible you get with some convertibles. And I don't know if Griffith or AMC bothered to do any actual wind tunnel testing, but they managed to produce a car that doesn't generate a lot of turbulence. It's a pretty comfortable ride.
And comfort is where the Concord excels. It really does ride like a luxury car twice its size. Yet when you look over the hood or step outside, it's surprising how compact it is.
Part of the Concord's appeal is that it combined the soft ride of a large American car with smaller dimensions that make it easier to drive and slightly more fuel efficient. And while I definitely appreciate the soft ride, especially when driving over something like railroad tracks, I have noticed a loss of structural rigidity caused by the convertible version. There's definitely a lot of front-end wobble going on as you hit bumps and go over rough roads that I don't think would be an issue in the sedan version of the Concord.
Almost every convertible has worse handling than its hardtop sibling, and the Sundancer is no different. The soft suspension smooths out the bumps, but it can't hide the noticeable cow shake, and the old interior plastics did a lot of creaking. But none of these are deal breakers, and I guess some of them are just trade-offs that come with owning a vintage convertible. Speaking of owners, both AMC and Griffith had trouble finding ones for these cars. As it turned out, the Sundancers lacked the appeal of the smaller, sportier Celica Sun Chaser. The Griffith conversion added around $4,000 to the cost of the car, resulting in a hefty price tag for the Concord and even more so for the Eagle. Most car shoppers weren't ready to pay over $10,000 for a reskinned Hornet just because it didn't have a roof. AMC collectors theorize that most of these cars were actually ordered by dealers hoping to increase showroom traffic rather than real customers. That could potentially explain why this car has the cheaper engine in what was a possible attempt to keep the sticker price down. Griffith had grand plans to move to Wisconsin and build a facility next to AMC's Kenosha factory, where he could churn out even more conversions. But the project's abysmal sales killed that dream. In fact, financial losses from the Sundancer program sadly meant that Griffith didn't have enough money to create a new version of the Sun Chaser to go with Toyota's redesigned Celica, which likely would have been a success. Instead, the Sundancer was canceled after 1982, and AMC stopped Concord production the following year, focusing on Jeep, Eagle, and Renault models. With no clear path forward, Jack Griffith sold his company in 1984. It's hard not to wonder what would happen if, back in the early 70s, AMC executives had decided to build the Concord first, instead of the Pacer. Interestingly enough, Ford launched the compact luxury Granada the same year as the Pacer, and it became a smash hit, often outselling AMC's entire lineup. Clearly, buyers were ready for it. As it happened, the Concord did become a minor success, but it came too late in the game to save American motors from financial peril. By the mid-80s, after swearing they'd left it for good, GM, Ford, and Chrysler all cautiously dipped back into the convertible market, quietly outsourcing some of the work to coach builders. Late to the party, as usual, AMC helped design a factory-built Renault Alliance convertible for 1985, but apparently having forgotten lessons from the past, it too never sold in high volumes. A collector once told me all AMCs are rare. And I suppose compared to Fords or Chevys, that's true. Exactly how rare this car is hard to pin down. The sale of the Griffith company included all the production records, and nobody has ever tracked down the official total. It's estimated around 200 Sundancers were built, but the division of Concords versus Eagles is unknown. Fewer than 100 cars are accounted for today, although that scarcity doesn't translate to resale value. While 1980s cars are finally getting their well-deserved time in the spotlight, most of the attention is paid to quirky imports, front-wheel drive hatchbacks, sports cars, and vintage digital techno-gadgetry. In other words, not cars like this.
When people say that they like 80s cars, what they really mean is they like certain 80s cars. The right kind of 80s cars. It's just like when a guy says he likes nerdy girls, what he usually means is he likes hot girls that also play video games.
And personally, I don't have anything against hot hatches or digital dashboards or weird minivans or girls who play video games or the guys who like them. It just feels like, after years of being social outcasts together, the world of 80s cars is growing up and separating into cliques. These days, if people see an unrestored Toyota Tercel at the grocery store, they're likely to think, "Wow, this is so unique and eccentric." But if they see an unrestored AMC Concord, they think, "Wow, that car probably smells like cigarettes." In other words, the Concord gets to go to prom, but it's not invited to the after party. Even within the AMC collector community, which is more egalitarian than most, Concords are kind of at the bottom of the heap in terms of collectability. Ramblers are classy and cute. The muscle cars are, well, muscle cars. Even the Pacer and Gremlin are weird and colorful and attract attention at car shows. But the Concord is just a small, slow sedan with a comfy interior that served as honest transportation for thousands of drivers. It's remarkably normal.
So he found his stopping ground above the broken river town, above where all the old trees grow below the clouds. He was chasing me. It's not always condescending glares or fingers fall too tired to care that shy us from knowing the texture of the truth.
You know, there's just something about convertibles. You take the most boring possible car and cut the roof off, and all of a sudden, people are excited. It's fun to ride in. People wave at you. You know, the weather's nice. It's, oh, let's get the convertible out the garage and go for a ride. And I think that's just the magic that comes with open air driving. Removing the roof makes everyone have a good time, which is kind of what makes the Concord Sundancer so unique. They took a very basic, plain car and turned it into something really special.
After all, Jack Griffith could have built convertible Mustangs or Corvettes or even more Z cars. But for some reason, he chose AMC. And while the Sundancer wasn't a huge success, on the plus side, nowadays, almost anyone can afford one.
I think there's a certain genuineness to this car that really appeals to me. You can't buy this car in hopes that it'll make you famous on the internet or that it's gonna cause people to crowd around you at car shows. It just isn't that kind of car. And so as a result, the kind of person who's gonna buy this car is going to be someone who really loves it, no matter how unknown it is to the rest of the world.
And thankfully, that's exactly the kind of person who bought this Sundancer. My friend loves this car. Since I drove it, he's already been hard at work getting it cleaned up and restored to its former glory. Which means after a long, weird, wild journey, this 1982 AMC Concord can look forward to many more days in the sun.
I can't say how we ended up this way, but I don't need a friend. I need you again.
I hope you enjoyed our video. Now, don't forget to check out our trailer for The Last Independent Automaker, a 6-part documentary series on the history of American motors coming in 2024. With dozens of interviews and hours of historical footage, I can say with full confidence that this will be the most in-depth documentary of American motors ever produced, packed with cool cars, fascinating people, and incredible stories. But we can't do this alone. If you're as excited about this project as I am, please consider donating to our GoFundMe campaign. Every dollar raised will go toward helping us preserve automotive history for future generations. Thank you so much for your support. And until next time, thank you very much for watching.
Yeah, you said this would be easy. Please be careful what you claim. You're gonna get me in trouble. And this gets harder. And this gets harder every day.